Hey everyone, so I'd like to take you through the preview for the Heredity, Incomplete, and Codominant traits lesson. When you get onto the Google Drive, you'll have access to all three of these, just like on some of the other ones. So you've got a PDF here that gives you some teacher tips and things like that, and then of course the answer keys there. So we'll go ahead and dive into the student notebook, which is what the students will be completing in this lesson. And like with the other ones, you can definitely, once you have your copy of this, you can split it up, which for some students that might be a helpful thing to do. And so you can kind of use your table of contents as a guide as to which slides to split up and then assign out. So for example, you could assign out slides 3 through 5 first as its own assignment, and then 6 through 7 and so on. So going through here, this is really going to focus on two things. So the end product is that students understand those twists to genetic rules, which is incomplete and codominant traits. And then, but it's also like with our Mendelian dominant recessive lesson, it's really going to get the kids thinking about revising models and rethinking the rules that they had come up with initially and kind of driving their ideas and thoughts on it before jumping into just telling them what the rules are. So this first activity, predicting traits observation activity 1, we've got a fictitious monster here, and they're going to go ahead and use their knowledge of genetics to figure out what they think the offspring is going to look like. Now, most likely they're going to say, oh, the offspring are going to be blue because they're going to have a dominant genotype allele and then with a recessive allele, and that's going to make them be blue. But then we're going to find that the outcome is actually that all of the offspring are green. So this is where they have to really start thinking about, okay, so now we have to revise our models, which is not uncommon in science. When new things come up, when we observe new phenomena, then we have to revise our models and our ways of thinking around the phenomenon. So that's what this is really getting at. So they're going to try and come up with a new rule that might fit with what they're observing. Okay, and then that's going to take them into the reading passage, a fairly short reading passage, really focusing on some examples of what incomplete dominance. So this first piece is on incomplete dominance, where a new phenotype is formed, and so they're going to read about that, and then they're going to do some practice. So they should already be familiar with the Punnett square at this point if they've done other lessons with dominant and recessive. That they should have familiarity with that. And so this is just practicing that, but interpreting the genotypes differently because of that incomplete dominant piece. So they've got some practice there. In fact, they've got lots of practice. And again, you could definitely piece this out and use some of it as an assessment piece, especially these last slides here, the last six slides here from 12 to 18. Okay, then the second part of this is looking at codominant traits. So in this case, again, we've got an observation activity, and now they're already thinking, okay, sometimes we get to revise the models and think differently about things, so that might drive them to have new ideas. So here we have, again, a fictitious monster species, one with these little sharp horns and one with these rounded horns. And then here are their offspring. And so initially they're going to predict what they think is going to happen. And then this is their offspring. Their offspring end up having both horn types. And most interestingly, the genotype has two capital letters, which symbolizes two dominant genetics or alleles, I'm sorry. So again, they're going to think through this phenomenon, think through what they just saw happen, and try and come up with a new rule, okay? And then they'll be introduced through the reading passage to this third rule of codominance and what creates that phenomenon. And then they're going to look at some real life examples. So we have one example with, this is pretty common in chicken feathers. We see this a lot. And then probably the most common example, a little bit trickier though, is human blood type, which can run on both dominant and recessive and codominant rules of genetics. So that's kind of a fun and interesting one as well. Then they're going to do some practice. And again, this is a nice piece to separate out and give as a final assessment piece if you want to do that, especially these last two slides where it is looking at the at the human blood type, because then you're really having to think about all the different rules at one time. So there's the preview on that one. I hope you enjoy that. Please feel free to leave comments. Email me if you have any questions. Have fun teaching.